And I'll be honest with you, one of the reasons why I was happy to have you on is because you did the wet work, to which we really salute you. And I'm glad you said what you did, because people who want to go out there and find the truth may be out there for quite some time, and do they have the diligence and the endurance, the wherewithal, to continue?
Yeah, that's the that's the main problem as I see it. And the problem is the people never learn from history, because when I started in this about 1976, when I won my first traffic case, one thing led to another. See, I was like everybody. When you're getting out of high school, you're worried about girls and running around and having a good time.
Mm-hmm.
You're not worried about government. You're not worried about anything. And then, say from 20 to 25 or 26, you're looking to get married and raise a family, and you do. And then your responsibility then is to keep the family going and be the provider for it. So by the time you get to 40 years old, which I was, and that's when I realized that something's wrong with the country. It's rare to find an 18 to 25-year-old that would want to do what I did, or anybody like me, and go into the library and sit there boringly for years at a time, going over everything, and all your other friends are out there having cars and having a family and carousing around or whatever you want to do, But what I find is that the people in my age group, we're dwindling now, and we were, I think, the last ones that had a decent education in where we could then apply what we knew. I mean, we got a good history, geography, English, the use of the grammar, and today's kids, they're just dumbed down so much. Anybody under, I'd say, 40 years old, 45, because I'm using my kids as a basis for this. My oldest is almost 50, and the youngest one is about 40. So, and when I brought my kids up, I could see that about 1965, the education system started to go downhill real fast.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem, is why you don't find these young kids or anybody up to 35 going in and looking in the library and reading and understanding actually the words that are there. You can take 5 people and they can read the same passage, and you'll get 5 different interpretations of that. And that is the main problem with today's so-called patriot. I don't like to use the word patriot, because that's one who supports the present regime.
Yeah. I mean, labels are horrible anyway, but let me at least speak to what you said about the education, and of course you're absolutely right. And there's a number of books out there that do speak to the fact that the education was placed in the hands of one such as John Dewey, a flaming socialist/communist, and it was all about training in the end, and we're seeing that. So you're right, the classical education was thrown to the wayside. Children are disassociated and disaffected from the laws of the land and the way things really were and what we're supposed to be about, so that they'll have no connection to that, and it'll be easier for them to let go, because obviously what we're headed for is a one-world government. You did mention something, though, Iman, and I want to speak to it, and then we're going to get into the core of the matter that will frame this first segment. And that is, you did mention admiralty. Now, a lot of us, our ears pop up when we hear that. We think of gold fringe flags, etc., etc., but really, there is something to the fact that what we're looking at in courts of law and such is that, yeah, those flags are there for a purpose. And I'm saying this, if I'm wrong, please let me know. But is it admiralty law that's in the courthouses today?
Believe it or not, yes. And this is the basis and a lot of myth that goes into what the people are looking at today. There is a case. And you also get this in Admiralty, Benedict on Admiralty, but there's a case called the United States versus Bevans. And this is not the Bevans case that is present. This goes back to 3 Wheat 336.
How would you spell that last name?
Bevans.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I won't go through the whole case. It was in the Supreme Court of the United States in 1818. And it's the highlight of the case is, and now this, let me go into, people are going to view what I say as cognitive dissonance, if you know what I mean. In other words, they're going to look at a lie they've been fed all their lives, which they believe to be true. Then when someone comes along and says the truth, that's where cognitive dissonance come in. They will not believe the truth and believe it to be a lie.
Right, because it doesn't match up with what they've been told in their history books and textbooks, right? Okay.
Now, in this case, it says habeas and trial by jury is admiralty maritime as it is universal law. Now, the universal law goes back to the law of Hammer. And it says that in this particular case on 363, that jurisdiction is exclusively vested in the United States courts, and therefore the state court could not take cognizance of an offense. Here they're talking about maritime crime. But it says, there are no doubt the courts of the United States are courts of limited jurisdiction, but not limited as cognizance to general class of cases. This meaning and extent of the terms that they fought for, not in the common law, but in the civil law. Now, right here, this explains in this case that the civil law that we know of today is pure admiralty. In admiralty, there are two sides. There's prize and civil. The prize is criminal in admiralty. Once they bring in a criminal action, they revert to the civil side, and everything falls under Title 28, because Title 28 is a pure admiralty statute. The whole title on that.
Okay.
And that's what you're dealing with in the courts. And of course, all the courts, federal district courts, and even the state courts, do have maritime cognizance and can rule on certain maritime, but the states can't rule on piracy on the high seas and so forth that was brought up in the Constitution. So that's what the states were prohibited from doing, the international part. So basically that's what you've got. When you go into the courts and you're on the civil side, you know that you're in admiralty. And the Unification Act of 1966 plainly stated that this is the case.
Okay.
So, like I say, it's really convoluted, and of course the Uniform Commercial Code was the old negotiable instrument law, and it still rules parametera because that is tied to admiralty. The admiralty and the UCC is one and the same. It's just a different name, that's all.
One last question, and we'll go on to especially talking about what you wanted to address, and that's the Templars of the Crown and what the Crown really means. But we hear a lot now from the Patriot community, or whatever you want to call it, that talks about, especially when people want to defend themselves and they bring the Constitution in the courtroom, and
right.
We hear time and time again that the judges get like apoplectic and said, don't bring that in here.
Right.
Is that a fact?
Yeah, it's a fact. And the reason is because they're all dealing in private law. And the Constitution is really not made for man, the common man. It's made for the law merchants operating as government. In other words, the Constitution is a legal document. There's no doubt about that. It's been written in the journals as a legal document, and it is couched in legal terms. And that's where a lot of people